I raised my daughters alone for 20 years, then they dumped me for their mom's rich husband who offered to adopt them. My name's Elias, and I'm 54 now. But everything really started to unravel just a few years back. I spent nearly 3 decades working at the same manufacturing plant, started out on the floor, worked my way up to a mid-level position. My wife, Leona, left when our daughters, Amara and Callista, were still little. Amara was 10. Callista was 7. Leona was never really made for the quiet, everyday rhythm of family life. After she walked out, her appearances were unpredictable. Sometimes she'd breeze in with a big smile and even bigger promises. Other times, she'd vanish for months like we didn't exist. When she did visit, it usually ended in disappointment. Some plan she made would fall through, and the girls would be crushed all over again. So, most of the parenting? That was on me. I wasn't perfect by any stretch, but I was always there. I wanted them to have more than I ever did, a life with actual options. I grew up working class, we always had food, a roof over our heads, but that was about it. I swore my girls wouldn't have to settle like that. I worked constantly. The plant was my main gig, but I took on side work, 2 handyman jobs, a bit of consulting tied to my factory experience. Some weeks I pulled 60, sometimes 70 hours. Year after year. It paid off. I was able to send them to a decent private school. I paid for SAT tutors. Then I paid for college. Amara spent a semester abroad in Spain. Callista needed help getting her first car. I covered that, too. We weren't wealthy by any means. I still live in the same modest house. My pickup truck lasted 15 years. Half my work jeans were patches holding patches together. But the girls? They didn't lack for anything. They had what they needed to focus on school and enjoy something close to a regular childhood. Everything started shifting when they got into their early 20s. That's when Leona began showing up more. She'd gotten remarried. His name's Sterling. The guy seemed successful, or at least dressed like he was. Ran his own business, wore sharp suits, drove some high-end car. With him, Leona seemed different, more polished, like she'd leveled up. Sterling didn't just stay in the background either. He got involved with Amara and Callista right away. Got Amara an internship through a friend of his. Hooked Callista up with a local agency he had connections with. At first, I thought maybe this was a good thing, more people in their corner couldn't hurt, right? But then the vibe started to change. The girls started pulling away. Phone calls got shorter. They were always busy, and that usually meant something involving Sterling or Leona. They started dropping comments about Sterling's place, his circle, his lifestyle. Suddenly, my quiet home must have felt small and boring. I still remember the weekend I planned a camping trip, just like we used to do when they were kids. They both canceled last minute. Amara said Sterling had invited them to some formal event. Callista had a networking function, also arranged by Sterling. Yeah, it stung. But I told myself they were grown now, doing their thing. Then the questions started creeping in. Small at first. Casual comments about who they looked like, where they got certain traits. Leona, it turned out, had been feeding them stories. One night, Amara called. She sounded uneasy. Asked me if there was anything I hadn't told them about Leona or the time before we split up. I asked what she meant. That's when she said Leona had admitted to having an affair before the divorce. And now, Leona supposedly believed someone else might be their real father. I was floored. We had our problems, plenty of them, but not once did I question whether those girls were mine. Apparently, Sterling had been part of these discussions too. According to Amara, he brought up how, strictly for tax and estate reasons, he could adopt them as adults. Said it would legally formalize their place in his and Leona's family. Suddenly, they were using terms I'd never heard them say before. Modern family dynamics. Emotional clarity. Finding closure around their true origins. I started recognizing the old Leona again, just dressed in new clothes. Back when we were married, her temper could go from 0 to nuclear. I remember when Amara was 5, Leona had promised to take her to a puppet show. Then a friend invited her on a last-minute city trip, and the puppet show was forgotten like it never existed. I brought it up gently, just said Amara would be heartbroken. Leona lost it. Screamed that I was trying to ruin her life, through things. Amara was hiding behind a chair, terrified. That was the pattern. Drama, then denial, then silence. Now she was back, this time with Sterling's money and charm smoothing over her messiness. But underneath? Still the same woman. Just using new tools to pull the girls in. There was another time when the girls were teens. Leona was supposed to take them school shopping. She showed up 3 hours late, reeking of wine, and had only brought half the money she promised. When Callista quietly asked if they could still get the sneakers she wanted, Leona exploded. Called them ungrateful. threw what little cash she had on the table and stormed out. They cried. I took them the next day. That was her pattern: big plans, big breakdowns, and me picking up the pieces. Sterling, for all his polish, was helping her do it again. And this time, it was working. The big confrontation came a few weeks after that phone call with Amara. Both girls showed up at my place. Sat on the old couch in the living room. Amara did most of the talking. Callista kept her eyes on the floor. Amara repeated what Leona had told them. That she'd had an affair around when Amara was conceived. Then another one before Callista. That she was now convinced I wasn't their biological father. And that this revelation was deeply upsetting, and she wanted to make it right. Then Callista chimed in, said Sterling had explained everything. If he adopted them, it would streamline things like inheritance and estate planning. It was, according to him, just a smart financial move. It's just legal stuff, Dad, she said. For taxes and stuff. Amara nodded. It's not personal, Dad. Then she added something that cut deeper than anything else. Sterling fits better with our lives now. Mom's happy again. And with his help, things are finally looking up. I didn't react right away. Just sat there, letting the words crash around in my head. All those years. All that work. And now this? Leona, the woman who barely showed up, and her rich new husband had convinced my daughters I wasn't their real father. And they were going along with it. For convenience. I stood up and went to the old filing cabinet. Pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in years. During the divorce, Leona had tried this trick before, claimed I wasn't Amara's father. Probably just to get leverage. So we were ordered to get paternity tests for both girls. Court required it. I laid the documents on the table in front of them, legal proof. DNA confirmed. Amara and Callista were both mine, biologically and legally. Amara picked up the first page, glanced at it, then set it back down. Callista didn't even look. Mom said those old tests might not be reliable, Amara muttered, her voice totally flat. She said, things are more advanced now, like that somehow invalidated everything in those court-ordered test results. Then Callista quietly added that Sterling had offered to pay for new paternity tests if we really wanted, but he also said, what's the point? It's about who shows up, and he's the one stepping up now. It wasn't the words that hit the hardest. It was how detached they were. Like none of it mattered. Like truth had taken a backseat to whatever made life easier. It wasn't about facts for them anymore. It was about comfort. About convenience. About whatever version of the story Leona and Sterling were feeding them. They didn't even argue about the documents. They just brushed them off, like they were meaningless. You could tell they'd already made up their minds, or, more likely, someone else had made those minds up for them. Then Amara said it, almost like she was giving a respectful farewell. Look, Dad, we're thankful for everything you did while we were growing up. But we're adults now, and we have to think about our future. Mom and Sterling are offering us a different kind of future. I just sat there. Quiet. Processing. They both looked a little fidgety, like they were waiting for me to lose it or start pleading for them to change their minds. But I didn't. I just felt numb. Like a light switch flipped inside me and suddenly everything went still. I gathered the paternity paperwork off the table, folded it back into the envelope, and slid it into the drawer where it came from. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask them to reconsider. What was the point? They'd made their decision, and I wasn't going to beg to be part of their future. I looked at them, really looked. The same girls I'd taught to ride bikes, stayed up with when they had fevers, worked overtime for so they could go to good schools. My daughters. And then I acted. The very next day, I started making calls. First, I cut off the financial support. I had still been helping Callista out with money for her supplies. Gone. I'd been sending Amara a little each month to help with her city rent. Stopped. Then I called my insurance provider and took them off my health plan. They were grown, time to find their own coverage. Callista's car? I had co-signed that loan. I reached out to the bank and explained I was withdrawing my signature. It wasn't easy, but it could be done. They'd have to refinance, or Sterling could step in and back it himself. I had also set up little emergency savings accounts for each of them years ago, quietly adding to them here and there. I closed those out and moved the money back into my own account. After that, I sent each of them a message, same one for both. Calm, direct. I've received your decision regarding your family and future. Since you no longer consider me your father, I will no longer be financially responsible for your adult lives. I wish you well. Then I blocked their numbers. I needed breathing room, distance. And for a while, nothing happened. I didn't hear a thing. I assumed they were busy settling into the new version of their lives, Leona and Sterling front and center. Months passed. I unblocked their numbers eventually, more out of curiosity than hope. But the silence stayed. Not a peep from either one. So I kept on. Wake up. Go to work. Come home. Try to adjust to the stillness of a house that used to be full of life. It was hard, every room carried some memory. But I kept moving forward, one slow step at a time. Then things started to shift, but not for me. For them. I began to hear little pieces of gossip, bits of info through old contacts. Turns out Sterling's business took a serious hit. Some deal went south. That empire he flaunted? Not as sturdy as it looked. Those impressive connections that were supposed to catapult Amara into her dream career after her internship? They fizzled. The internship ended, and no full-time job offer ever came. Callista? That agency Sterling got her into? They lost their top client. Her hours were first reduced, then practically disappeared. And with all that going down, Leona and Sterling started pulling away, not just emotionally, but financially. The emotional support they once lavished the girls with vanished right alongside the money. Their shiny new future? It started looking real dim. Then, 6 months after I'd sent that final text, the messages began trickling in. Nothing heavy. Just feelers. Callista texted first. Hey Dad. Just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. No acknowledgement. No explanation. Just a ping. A week later, Amara left a voicemail. Hi Dad, it's me. Was just thinking about you. Call if you want. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? After everything they'd done? After they tossed me aside for a better fit? So yeah, now they want to talk. Now that the money's gone and the fantasy crumbled. Now that their backup plan doesn't look so solid. And here I am, wondering if I tell them there's nothing left to say, am I the bad guy? Update 1. Honestly, I didn't expect the kind of response I got. The messages, the comments, thank you. Every one of you who read my story and took the time to weigh in, it means more than you know. A bunch of you asked why the girls fell for Leona's story so easily. It's a tough one to answer. Leona has always had this knack for getting people to believe her, especially when she's emotional. When she gets worked up, she's a master at twisting things, flipping the blame, turning herself into the victim. She's also incredibly entitled. If she wants something, she finds a way to justify taking it, no matter who gets hurt. And Sterling? He was like a shiny new toy. Money, charm, the image of success. Leona probably used him to sell a whole new fantasy, one where the girls were part of this perfect, exciting life. She painted me as the old, boring past. Sterling became the future. A few of you asked if Sterling was outright malicious. I don't think so, not in a movie villain kind of way. But he definitely enabled Leona. He saw an opportunity to step in, look generous, play the role of rescuer. I doubt he thought much about what it meant long term. I don't think he realized how much I was doing behind the scenes or how expensive it would be if he had to actually follow through. All that talk about adoption, taxes, and legal strategy? It made it sound logical, sensible, easy. He and Leona packaged it like the girls were just upgrading families, clean, simple. Some people asked if Amara or Callista ever reached out with actual remorse before everything went south with Sterling. The answer's no. Not even a hint. When they finally texted and called, it was like nothing had happened. No apology. No we messed up. Just a casual, hey dad. Like we were all fine. But reading through your messages, thinking more about it, I started to realize something. A lot of you said I don't owe them anything. Others said maybe I should hear them out for my own peace of mind. At first, I didn't think I needed closure. Their actions had already closed the door for me. But then last Saturday morning, they rang the doorbell. Just showed up. Both of them. Right there on my porch. They looked worn out. Amara's eyes were swollen like she'd been crying. Callista looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Seeing them like that, I decided I'd listen. When Amara asked, Dad, can we talk? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at them. Amara looked down. Callista bit her lip. I finally said, all right. You've got 10 minutes. That caught them off guard. I think they were expecting me to slam the door or fall apart. Instead, I turned and walked into the living room. The same room where they'd told me Sterling was a better fit. I didn't offer them a seat. I stayed standing, and so did they. It was awkward, tense. Then Amara spoke first. Dad, we really messed up, she said. Callista nodded, eyes watery. We were so stupid. Amara kept going. Mom, she just made everything sound so real. And Sterling, he painted this picture of this exciting, easy life. Like all our problems would just disappear. She finally looked me in the eyes. I think I wanted to believe it, Dad. I really did. I wanted to believe it could all be easy. That we could just start over. So that's what it was about for them, a clean slate. A new beginning that didn't include the life they'd actually lived. Good to know. Then Callista spoke, her voice trembling. She said she just wanted to feel like she belonged to something that looked successful. That Sterling seemed like he had it all together. That their mom was glowing with happiness. And she figured maybe this was her shot at having that kind of life. As she spoke, tears started sliding down her face. She wasn't sobbing, just quietly unraveling. She said they hadn't realized what they were giving up. Not really. They kept talking after that, mostly explanations. Excuses, if I'm being honest. How Leona pressured them. How Sterling made promises that sounded so good at the time. How they felt overwhelmed. How everything had turned out to be a disaster. Leona was apparently making their lives miserable now, blaming them for not being grateful enough when the money started drying up. And Sterling? He'd turned cold. Distant. Didn't care about their problems anymore. That glossy, perfect future they'd chased fell apart fast. I listened. That's all I did. I didn't interrupt. I didn't hand Callista a tissue. I didn't tell them it would be okay. I kept my face blank, emotionless. Just let them talk themselves out. And when they finally stopped, when they looked up at me with tear-streaked faces and nervous eyes, hoping for some sign of forgiveness, I took a breath. And this is what I told them. I kept my voice steady. No yelling. No dramatics. Let me get this straight, I said. Your mother, who abandoned you and broke her word over and over again throughout your childhood, told you I wasn't your father. Then her new husband, a guy you barely knew, offered to adopt you for tax benefits and to round out his perfect little family. And both of you, my adult daughters, both educated, thought that made sense. They flinched. And Amara, I continued, you said you wanted a fresh start. From what? From the father who worked 70-hour weeks to give you every advantage he never had? And Callista, you wanted to feel like you were part of something successful. Was everything I did for you not a success in your eyes? Callista let out a louder sob. No, Dad, it's not like that. We didn't mean. I cut her off, my tone still calm but firm. You didn't mean what, exactly? What did you mean when you looked at legal proof that I'm your biological father and tossed it aside like junk mail? What did you mean, Amara, when you told me Sterling fit better in your lives? She tried to backpedal. Dad, please. We know we were wrong. We're so sorry. Sorry doesn't undo choices, I said flatly. You made your decision. You chose them. You chose their version of the story. You chose their practical reasons over your actual life. You came into this very room and told me, straight-faced, that I wasn't your father anymore. I paused. They were both crying now. That didn't move me. You came back now because that new life you picked fell apart. Sterling's money is gone. Your mother's acting like herself again. So here you are, hoping the old safety net me is still here, ready to catch you. I looked between them. Well, here's my answer. You were right. You did throw something away. You tossed aside our relationship. You shattered my trust. And you gave up any right to call me your father the moment you chose to believe I wasn't. You walked out that door and became Leona's daughters. Sterling's stepdaughters. Not mine. I nodded toward the door. Your 10 minutes are up. There's nothing left for you here. Not my time, not my money, not my support. Nothing. Go back to Leona and Sterling. You chose them. Live with that. They stood there, stunned. Amara looked like I'd slapped her. Dad, you don't mean that. We're still your daughters. No, I said. You made it very clear that you're not. I've got legal papers that prove you're mine biologically, sure. But you rejected that. You rejected me. So no, you're not my daughters anymore. Not in any way that matters. Callista was shaking, completely silent, tears pouring down her face. Amara opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. She must have seen something in my eyes, some kind of finality, because she gently took Callista's arm and turned toward the door. I watched them walk down the front path to Callista's car, the same car I used to help pay for, and drive away. Then I closed the door. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt quiet. Like a long, nasty storm had finally moved off the horizon, and the sky was clear again. I know it sounded harsh. But it was honest. They burned that bridge themselves. All I did was confirm it was ash. What happens to them now? I don't know. And truthfully, I don't care. Like a lot of you said, it's time I lived for myself. Update 2. It's been almost a year since that last conversation. And since then? I haven't heard a single word from either Amara or Callista. Nothing. They took what I said to heart, I guess. Or maybe Leona and Sterling tightened the reins again. Or maybe they just found some other way to patch things up and moved on. I don't know. I haven't asked. I haven't looked. Some folks might call that cold. But I spent over 20 years putting them ahead of everything else. Every decision, every extra shift, every drop of energy went toward making their lives better. And when they had the chance, they believed the worst about me. They walked away. They traded loyalty for illusion. They threw me out like I didn't matter. All because I wasn't glamorous enough to compete with the fantasy life Sterling dangled in front of them. The truth is, I ran out of fatherly feelings for them the day they rejected those test results. What I said during our last talk, that wasn't cruelty. That was me putting words to the actions they had already taken. Now, my life is simple. I still work at the plant, still wear my beat-up jeans, still live in my little house. But it's peaceful now. No more fights. No more guilt trips. No more sleepless nights wondering how I'm going to cover tuition, or insurance, or a broken-down car. I don't keep tabs on Leona or Sterling. No one tells me anything, and I don't ask. They live in another city, and our paths don't cross. I imagine Leona's still playing the same games. People like her rarely change. And Sterling? I bet he's figured out by now that buying a ready-made family isn't as easy as writing a few checks. So that's it. That's the end of the story. No big climax. No redemption arc. They're gone from my life, and I'm finally free to live mine. I'm doing all right. And to everyone who's followed along and shared their thoughts, thank you. Seriously. It helped more than I can say. Just knowing I wasn't screaming into the void, that meant something.